So I'm joined by political editor at The Australian, Simon Benson. Simon, as Cameron mentioned there, 52-48 on a two-party basis. A year out, less than a year out now from the election. As a government, would they be feeling comfortable right now?
Well, I think Anthony Albanese would be happy enough with those numbers. I think Jim Chalmers possibly less so. And there you've got the sort of the mixed message out of these numbers. Or the mixed story, I suppose. It wouldn't be unfair to say that this budget has landed about as well with voters as it has with economists. Voters are unimpressed with it. And there's three key numbers I think we need to look at, possibly four. The first being that only 27% of voters think that this will be good for the economy. Now, that's the lowest on record. And there's probably two things going on there. Perhaps voters aren't buying the Future Made in Australia agenda, but I think more broadly, I think it reflects a general view of the economy with voters. Jim Chalmers hasn't had much luck with any of his budgets in terms of igniting the passions. And so in a way, it's consistent with the last two budgets, and I think that reflects a general negativity in the community, and perhaps people don't expect governments to actually do much for the economy anymore these days. The second number is the inflation number, of course, because that was a big pitch of the budget, was to bring down inflation by Christmas. 39% of people think it's going to actually add to inflation, so people aren't buying Jim Chalmers' story on inflation. Thirdly, will people be better off financially or worse off? 27% say they'll be worse off. So that, on the surface is not a good number. That's a low number, particularly when you're throwing billions around in handouts and tax cuts. In saying that, 27% is actually proportionally quite high on that measure for budgets, which is probably, again, a reflection of people's general sentiment towards budgets. So the budget hasn't landed well with people, but the government got a little bump. Anthony Albanese's numbers are up. So from that, I would suggest that there is a direct correlation, voting intention to the handouts. People have taken that. They don't like the budget. They're not impressed with the budget. They don't think government really can help them much, but they're going to take the cash. And for Anthony Albanese, the budget has probably done its job.
So there's been a bit of a bump there, you think, for the Prime Minister in that sense. But it's hard to remember. It's hard to remember one where there's been a major budget bounce. That's fair to say, isn't it? Normally it takes quite the sell in order for a government to bed down its economic plans, whether it be the tax cuts, rebates or whatever else.
Yeah, well, chasing a budget bounce is like chasing a unicorn. I mean, it's mythical, really, or it has been. That'd be the sort of contemporary analysis of budgets. We always remember the bad ones. I don't really remember the good ones, to be honest, and most people wouldn't. But in saying that, Anthony Albanese has managed to recover all that ground he lost post-referendum. I mean, he's been in negative territory, and reasonably significant negative territory for a while. That's now back at a neutral position. So, what's linked to that? I mean, you can only say if the budget is a reflection of people's views that perhaps they're happy with the tax cuts and they're happy with the subsidies, and Anthony Albanese's got a bit of a jump from that. The broader picture, 52-48, is this as good as it gets for Labor? I mean, they've been bouncing around 51-49, 52-48 for the past year, got as low as 50-50. All the indicators are that they are possibly looking at an early election. I genuinely believe that is a live option for them. And they'll be looking at this budget at 52-48, saying that's not bad. At that position, they can probably just hold on to majority government. I mean, it'll be a struggle. But as you say, and this is where it gets interesting. July 1, the tax cuts come in. Now, Labor's view of that is that a lot of people don't actually know about the tax cuts. From July 1, the $40 million that they've got tucked away in the budget for selling those tax cuts, that'll come into play on July 1. You run that out for a couple of months. Are we looking at an early election before the end of the year? Possibly.
Yeah, so that's part of the consideration. I guess much of it as well comes down to what the broader economy does and what the RBA does
Well,
in terms of its deliberations.
correct. And I mean, from Anthony Albanese's point of view, how long do you want to wait around to see what the RBA does? I mean, if they're right about inflation, all well and good. But as we've discussed at length last week, there's a lot of doubt about whether those numbers are realistic in terms of bringing down inflation. So for the economy and the politics, at the moment, you would have to say that going past the end of this year, perhaps it doesn't get any better for them.
Yeah, and so overall, if you take the helicopter view, you'd be quite comfortable with where the government's at in terms of still having a lead a year out from the election, but your analysis is that when it comes to specifically the budget, that hasn't been received that well. But overall, a tick for the government right now.
Overall, a tick for the government, and the budget, well, I mean, I don't think anyone really was expecting anything else.
Simon Benson, great to see you as always. Thank you very much for that.